Are you listening? Damn.
Welcome back, beautiful people. It is your girl, Media Mom, and we're back for another episode of Unpacking Media. So I'm so glad you guys are tuned back on this channel. And if you're new here, guys, welcome to the channel. Thank you very much for joining us in this lesson or this session where we unpack share of spend, share of market, and share of voice. And we talk about the relationship that these factors have or these metrics have with one another. So I also have a comment from last week. So guys, remember, comment below because your question could be featured next week when we discuss the topic that you suggest. So yes, I will be feedbacking on something that I was asked in the comments and also just going through the motions with you guys. Welcome back, guys. I want to take a second to say that I am proud of me for showing up. They say 60% of the marks is just showing up. Like they used to say that when I was in high school. And I'm like, you just need to show up to school. If you show up, you get 60% just for showing up. And yeah, I guess this is my 60%, guys. I showed up, I'm doing it, and we're doing another episode. So please stay tuned, like and subscribe. Don't forget to share and check you out. Cool. I had to fix my nose ring. It was looking weird. So cool. Let's start off, guys, with the definitions, right? Firstly, we need to understand what we're talking about. Whenever you hear share of, just think of pie or a cake. And we are now saying of that whole cake, what is our fraction? What fraction do we have of that cake, right? So that cake could be spend, and we're talking about marketing spend. Based on us and our competitors or everyone in our category, what is our share of that pie, of that spend that is going into market? And then we're speaking about share of voice. We're talking what is the share of visibility that our brand has in comparison to our category or our competitors. And then we look at share of market. And again, this is the size of the piece of pie or cake based on market penetration or success, right? So, just for context, share of spend, this is something that we measure looking at advertising spend across the board. And with this, you need to know that a lot of platforms, especially traditional platforms, use this thing called a rate card. So a rate card essentially is when multi-choice ACBC and whoever else you're looking at, even on a print side or radio side, we're looking at, okay, how much does it cost to advertise on this platform, right? So they'll give you a rate card where you'll see individual time slots and how much it will cost for you to put your 30 seconds, because that's the average that we always use. We use the base of 30 seconds. And we say, okay, for a 30-second slot during these hours, this is how much it's going to cost to have your brand on those platforms. Now, you always need to remember that the more popular that segment or that hour is, then the more expensive it's going to be, right? You want to reach a lot of people. Guess what? That's where they make their money. They're going to charge you a lot more to be on prime time. And that's what we classify them as, prime time spots. And this is where your classic TV audiences sitting, and you'll find everyone who's watching anything from Scheme Sam to Generations, Isidingo. Is that still in air? I don't think so. I haven't watched traditional TV in a very long time, but essentially it is all of those popular programs that will play most likely between the hours of 6 and 8 p.m. or start airing from 8 p.m. So we're saying 6 to 9 p.m. is your most optimal time. These are the expensive spots because, hey, everybody's back home from work and school. Everyone's kind of like cooling down. You've done your homework, everyone getting ready for dinner. So it's like that opportunity for brands to really get in the faces of the consumers that they're looking for, especially with this broad profile, right? If everyone's coming back from school, you're getting the mom, you're getting the dad, you're getting the kids all watching this program at the same time. So it's a really great opportunity for mass brands that really want to just kind of cater for a large majority of people to be placed in these places, right? Alternatively, what you get outside of Prime is then much more affordable spots, definitely much more affordable spots. But the caveat you need to remember is that because people are most likely not watching TV at this time, they are at work or they are doing other things, that spot is much more affordable because you aren't reaching as many people. And it gets more difficult now when you're kind of refining and tuning down to look at a very specific niche audience. this audience pool that you're tapping into at that time is not that big, so you're less likely to meet that audience that you're looking for, unless of course they are then your home executives. Yes, I'm not going to say housewives, home executives, and they're the ones who are most likely watching at that time, so they're the ones who are making the decisions also on which washing powder that you use for the home and which brand of cornflakes the kids are buying. So you take into consideration all of these factors when you are planning. And I'm speaking very largely to TV because that is a large reach medium. Almost everybody has a TV. I say almost because I have a TV, but I don't watch traditional TV. I am streaming all the time. Everything I watch is online. But traditionally, this is how TV is bought. Now, in future, there are like really cool things that we can do, but we're waiting for DTT to roll out completely, and that will allow us the potential to even target more specifically on region and have TV ads that are curated for that specific area. How cool would that be? So that's something you can do on radio. And that's again another platform where you'll have your share of voice and your spend being assessed. And it's about really with radio, you have the same principles of your prime slots where everyone wants to be there because everyone's listening during those times, and it really is your morning drive hour and your afternoon drive hour that is like prime advertising space, right? Because you've got this large audience that's tuned in there, and if you're driving, like you have no choice but to pay attention to the road and listen to what's happening on the radio, right? So again, that's a great opportunity for brands to really engage with their consumers. And what's really cool about radio is because it's localized a lot of the times is that you can curate your content to match that audience, whether it is using language that is local to that user base. So it could be predominantly Zulu listeners, and you'll just have a Zulu ad. Or you can even go as far as like, we know what time of the day it is and we know where this will play. So you can include some colloquial, like local language into your ad, and also like promote, hey, it's a hot day. Promote ice cream, like optimize and say, we're going to do ice cream on days where the temperatures are higher than within this region, right? So there's really like really cool stuff that you can get into when you are able to kind of fragment your audiences like this. And that's why I think, media fragmentation, a lot of people are concerned about it, but I think it does create a lot of opportunities to tap into these niche audiences, but also, play around with advertising again and make it fun. So yeah, that speaks to your share of spend and share of voice to some degree. And we'd use these to kind of determine how much are you spending using the rate cards and all of these. The other caveat you need to remember around share of spend is when you are using rate cards, most likely the brands that use those spots are not paying the prime time rate as it is, because agencies are able to go in and negotiate with broadcasters, right? When volume plays to your favor, and this is where economies of scale comes in, you're able to negotiate your rates to be lower, because then the media owner, the broadcaster, would then have guaranteed kind of sales and placements that they know that they can, guarantee revenue that way. So there is room for negotiation. So that's always something you need to remember. So when you are assessing your competitors in this context, just have that caveat in mind that yes, we are looking at these actual spends estimated, but there are negotiations that happen behind the scenes, and that could skew that perceived share of spend. But that's just something you should know. And then we've got share of voice again. As I mentioned with TV, radio, you're able to kind of calculate the TVRs, and this tells you how many users of your audience have been watching that program during that time that your ad went in. So we are able to measure that and compare, hey, who else was advertising within our competitors set at that time on those stations, and what share of voice do they have? So how many more ratings, or how many ratings do they have in comparison to ours? And what was the total kind of TVRs that all our competitors and category mates how much did they all garner, and from that, what was our piece of the pie, right? Again, that share that we speak about. And then share of market here, this is on the ground sales data. You can either compare your share of market by volume or by sales and sales revenue, right? Because you get two different stories when you're looking at share of market by volume, because volume tells you, okay, how many units are moving into the market, how many people, how many pieces of product have actually been bought. But looking at it from a sales revenue perspective, it also gives you an idea of understanding exactly. Okay, I want to find the right words to say this, right? The pricing strategy within that category, right? Now hang on with me here. By looking at your average, your sales volumes versus your sales and revenue, you're able to then determine, okay, we know how many units they were, but we also then know how much they're selling each unit for. And you can compare that to your own, unit price and see, oh, are they winning over the consumer because they are priced better than we are or slightly cheaper than we are? Or are we then being perceived as being premium because we are priced slightly higher? And you get into those discussions by understanding your share of market on volume and price or sales revenue, right? So that kind of gives you the gist of what share of spend, share of voice, and share of market are. And I hope I've made some things a little bit more clear for you here as we move on to the next step. Cool. So I remember in school being shown this triangle diagram, and it was always used to kind of show how the relationship of the two bottom factors. So normally this is how it's used, and I have kind of adjusted it to work for this example. But then your two factors at the bottom multiplied together will give you the factor at the top. And if the factor at the top, if you divide by the factor below one of them, you'll get the other, right? And that's how, for me, I've adapted this for this kind of theory. Not exactly the way that I was taught it, but it's just for me a very helpful tool to remember the relationships, that there are relationships between these three factors, and that's what we're going to get into, right? So we've gone through the definition. We understand what share of market, share of spend, and share of voice are. But it is important to understand how these factors work together and how do we assess them. So at the bottom, we've got share of spend and share of voice. Reason being, these two factors really do correlate with each other. Oftentimes, they can even tell you a story, right? Where you can understand that where your share of spend is high, you can anticipate that your share of voice is high. However, if you find that you have a high share of spend and a low share of voice, then that tells you that your spend may not be used optimally. So it's not being used to its best potential. So it might mean that you're spending a lot in advertising, yes, compared to your competitors, but then you're not achieving the metrics you need to achieve. So you're not reaching the users that you need to be reaching. So this tells us, okay, maybe we need to rejig, relook at how we are planning our media so that we are ensuring that we are reaching the right audience at the right time. And that's what, right? Media, right audience, right time, right message. So you want to get to them at the right time. You want to ensure that all the money that you are spending into your advertising is reaching the audience and being spent effectively. So those two factors speak to each other in that way. And you can also see that if your share of voice is really high, but your share of spend is low, then you really need to give kudos to your team because they have found a way to make your money go really far. Like your money is being stretched to the umpteenth point, right? And that's a really cool thing between these two factors that you'll find is that the more you spend, most likely the more amplified your brand is, the more visible your brand is to your consumers. However, if you find that you are spending a lot but not reaching your consumers, you may need to rejig and relook at your media plan. And if you find that your voice is very high but your spend is really low, that's when I just say people need to get promotions and promotions and salary increases because they're doing the most. They're doing like what others would perceive to be impossible with your brand. Oh, excuse me, guys. I am recovering from a cold, so forgive me. But yes, here are some formulas so you can calculate your share of market, share of voice, and share of spend. With share of market, like I mentioned before, you can either look at your sales revenue or your sales units, and you'll look at the brand. So your sales units or sales revenue divided by the total category or market sales revenue or units, right? And multiply that by 100. Like I said, it's a piece of the pie. So we want to know how big is your piece of the pie. Same applies with share of spend. We look at your brand spend. So how much have you spent on advertising? And then compare that, divide that by how much was spent by your category or your competitor set, and multiply by 100 to identify your share of your piece of the pie. And with the share of voice, same applies. We then look at your brand impressions divided by your total category or market impressions or mentions multiplied by 100. So this is important to add here. And I think what I spoke to earlier was really focused on traditional media. But when you are looking at digital media, you can also do these assessments, right? Share of spend becomes a little bit tricky on digital media because that is not overtly, it's not an open box. So we don't know how much our competitors are spending on digital media. And this is because that data is not really shared. It's not dispensed across the market, right? So we oftentimes, when spending on digital, you are doing a lot of bidding. So you're bidding for keywords, you are competing in the market to get that placement, whether it's a digital video on somebody's website or it is a sponsored ad at the top of the Google search bars, or you're looking at your YouTube video ad. It really is kind of there are different metrics, and I can do a separate video where we get into the digital metrics and how those are assessed and done. I think that is a separate video. If I try to get into that right now, I'm going to lose track of what I'm talking about, right? And I don't want to do that. So we've spoken about the relationship or how share of spend and share of voice kind of speak to one another. And now we need to look at how then your share of spend and your share of market versus your share of voice and your share of market as well, right? So we're going to unpack that for you guys just about now. All right, so now looking at share of market and share of voice together. So there's this theory that speaks about access share of voice, right? So this theory is really grounded in the idea that the higher your share of voice, then your share of market is likely to grow. And this is share in the future. So the theory behind this also is like it takes about 2 years to convert that voice or that share of voice into actual sales. So you need to allow your brand to kind of marinate within the market for 2 years, and then you'll start seeing the sales numbers pumping out. So that ROI then starts to come back, right? You start to get your money back from that initial investment. And that's the thing about investments, it takes time, right? It takes time for investments to grow. And that kind of speaks to this, right? So while a brand with a lower share of voice than share of market will then inevitably lose their market share, right? So the same applies within the 2 years period. Your share of voice may be decreasing because you've gone into budget cuts and you don't have as much money to advertise. And again, this is like COVID time all over again, where we kept on emphasizing. I remember working in the company I was working at the time, and we kept on emphasizing to our brand managers and stakeholders that we need to ensure that we're still spending. Yes, people have restrictions. You may not be able to access the product right now, but when products is available, when the time, because we're anticipating, right, that eventually we'll get back to some sense of normalcy. When that happens, you will regret having been silent during that period, because now being active during that period, you remain top of mind for your consumers. So this access share of voice theory just essentially says that by keeping your share of voice high, eventually this will bleed into your share of market. And if you then pull back on your share of voice or your spend, you'll ultimately eat away at your share of market, because now your competitors are much louder than you. They're in your consumers' faces. Your consumers are more aware of them, and they're more likely to trial the product because you're kind of shifting back into their brain to the point where it's like, yeah, yeah, I remember once upon a time, but they're not actively seeking your brand. They're no longer interested or engaged with the brand. And it is, again, sticky ground. Why it isn't so important to do your share of spend and your share of voice assessments or an analysis, so that you understand for the future, right? The idea behind business is that it will go on, it will continue to exist, right? So for the future, you want to ensure that your brand is still relevant and resonates with consumers. So you keep that share of voice, either pick up your share of voice or keep it where it is so that you can maintain. If you're a leader already within the category, you want to maintain that position, then you do not want to cut your spend because you will then become a forgotten brand. So you want to maintain that position. And if your share of voice is low, then you have a low budget that you are working with, you can't work around it, then it's about how do you spend that budget to the best of your ability to ensure that your share of voice is as high as it possibly can be, right? And that's kind of the theory and how they work together. So by again, starting from where I started, right? If we reduce share of spend, then we will ultimately see lowered share of voice. And with the lower share of voice, what will happen is that your share of market or your market share will decline with time. So by increasing your share of voice, and this doesn't necessarily mean increasing share of spend, sometimes it means that you just need to plan better or more effectively around your brand. So this could be by increasing your spend to be comparative to your competitors within the category, because you also don't want to be spending like a minuscule amount compared to everybody else. You don't want to be having like 1% share of spend, competing in a very big space, right? You'd like to have a decent amount of spend so that at least your voice can be amplified and can get further in comparison to your competitors, so that you can drive that market share ultimately at the top, right? At the top of this pyramid I've built. So that's how these factors work together. And it really is depending on where your brand is standing right now. You then play with these factors differently, pull and push wherever you can in order to optimize your share of market in the future, right? Unfortunately, you won't see a overnight return on this, and that's the sad truth, is that you may not see the return immediately, but it is, again, remember, it's return and investment that we're assessing here. So you're going to get it back. You will get it back. The more you are visible, the more consumers are aware of you, they will end up getting to a point, if you're in consumers' faces so much, it gets to a point where they default to you, right? They just default. It's like there's a point in the process where you're buying stuff and it's like, oh, I need to get. And it's like, oh, I need to get this. And there's this plethora of options available to the consumer and they don't know where to go. They'll just default to, the trusted one, the one that they've heard of the most, right? And that's where your return on investment comes in. That's where now all that amplification, all that spend, and ensuring that you're being placed in the right spaces at the right time, giving the right message, that's where it benefits your brand, because you'll start to see on the ground sales in return for all that advertising spend. Digital is a game changer because it does do things much faster, right? It turns things around much faster, and you're able to assess much easier that funnel approach, right? Building that awareness at top and then track your users all the way to that sale ultimately on your platform, or that invoice request, or whatever it is, that last conversion that you've identified. You are able then to kind of assess that more easily. It is not impossible to do over radio, and I'll do another video in the future talking, or not just radio but traditional, talking about how you can actually start to look at how to track that funnel activity, uh, all the way down to your sale. But like, that's a conversation, like I said, another video. As I'm doing this video, I'm like getting ideas for other videos to do, and I'm glad, because I wasn't sure what I was going to discuss next. But yeah, that is the relationship between these factors, and it really is a juggling situation, right? If you're new to market and there are existing established brands that you're going to be competing with, guess what? You're going to need to spend and ensure that you're spending in the right places and your messaging has impact so that you can get market share, right? And if you are a legacy brand, you've been in the market for forever, does not mean you stop spending, does not mean you pull back on your advertising. It just means you need to defend your place. You need to defend your position as number one by ensuring that you do not decrease your spend too much, that you are no longer as visible as you used to be, but then you ensure that you are spending optimally by placing your ads in your audience's face. And this is like your core audience, ensuring that they are seeing your product, they are aware that you're available, that you are still in the market. Because hey, brands disappear from the market sometimes, and sometimes you do a rebrand, or you do a facelift to your product. Your consumers need to know you did a facelift, right, before you start rolling out that facelift, so that they don't miss you when they're in the store, when they're making that final purchase decision. They shouldn't be confused about who your brand is. And this again plays a part in so many other decisions that you will make as a brand custodian, whether it is through agency or you are a brand manager or so on and so forth. There's so many ways in which one can be a brand custodian. But these are the things that you need to remember and just keep in the back of your mind every single time. Okay, so to wrap things up, guys, if you want to optimize and ensure that your SOM share of market is as high as it possibly can, it really is about aligning that share of voice and share of spend, right? Playing that balancing act. It's not about spending the most money, but it's about spending your money the most effective way to ensure that you are reaching your audience, you're getting that visibility that will eventually translate into increased market share. And yeah, that's the gist of it. So like I mentioned before, share of voice, share of spend, these can be measured in different ways. So every platform has its a way to monitor the share of voice, and share of spend might be trickier when we get into digital, but then you are still able to assess your share of voice. And that would be done through social listening for digital and online publications. You're able to then to assess how much your brand comes up in conversation versus your competitors, and then assess it that way based on mentions volume for your brand and competitor set. So yes, that is essentially the relationship between these three factors, how they speak to each other, and how you can use them to get a better understanding of where your brand stands in the market, why your market share is what it is, and how then can you better optimize to ensure that you maintain high market share or gain market share for your brands. All right, we are at the end of the video, guys, and I really want to give a huge shout out to everyone who showed love in the first video. I was not expecting that many views. It was not like a crazy amount, but I also like got really excited seeing the numbers. So I'm glad that you guys, tuned in, and I hope you continue to subscribe, like the videos, and definitely please engage. And I actually want to start off by giving a shout out to one of the comments that I got last week. It had a three-part question, and I want to answer that in this video. So there it is. So the first one is from at Sharon, and she's saying, "Well, hi, congratulations on launching Media Mom and teaching us media studies in an advertising context." And she's asked, "I would like a video on the different systems used to pull data for SOV, SOS, and SOM. And I would like to also know the different impacts an ad, so for example, lunch bar, would perform and how this would perform against TV, radio, digital, and out of home, using this SOV, SOS, and SOM model." And she also then finished off the question. I haven't included it in the screenshot, but she included a question saying, "Is it a model or is it a data measuring mechanism also?" So thank you so much to Amo for your question. And girl, I see you. I see you. Thank you. Just to answer your question, for the above, I'm going to refer to my notes because I wrote down my responses to make sure that I am answering this question properly. So, okay, so starting off from pulling this data, right? So, pulling data for SOV, SOS, and SOM, this is it comes in different packages, right? So SOM, so share of market data, you can get this from Nielsen. So Nielsen does do a study where they are able to assess how many products are out in market and who has purchased this. You are also, some brands have access to their own sales data. I remember historically working on a pharmaceutical brand where I was building a dashboard. This was back when we still use Excel to build dashboards. And we got the data from the client, and they would get it directly from Discam, Clicks, and other pharmaceuticals that provided their product. And we are able then to ascertain on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis how many sales units they were getting out, and also correlate that to the fluctuations of their media spending and media buying, right? So you can get your sales data from your sales partners, and if you are doing it as an independent business, you will have this data available to you for yourself. Now, in terms of your competitors, this might be a bit trickier. You may need to subscribe, again, like I said, to your Nielsen's and other stakeholders that provide this data for you, just so that you get context of how your competitors are selling compared to you, right? Cool. Then we look at share of spend. I mentioned it earlier in the video. There is Nielsen again. Nielsen will come up a lot. Nielsen and I believe Kantar as well can provide you with your sorry, I was referring to share voice. Yes, share of spend and share voice. Nielsen works with both of them. But yes, sorry, share of spend. Now, Nielsen will have your rate card rates that you can access through their platform to assess the entire category spend, and they have it for the entire whoever spends on advertising. Nielsen's got their buying behavior data, right? So they will be able to give you the rate card rate at which for the spots that brands have bought for on TV, radio. They are able to do it for print as well. And out of home as well. However, there's always an asterisk, there's always caution with that number because not every out of home supplier or media owner will provide their data to Nielsen. So it will come from your major out of home stakeholders, and they will provide that data to Nielsen. However, it isn't everybody, and you need to understand that it's a very wide group of brands that are available, or media owners within the out of home space that you are able to work with. So you may not get all that data from there, but it does give you some idea of which big brands are spending with which big or established media owners in the market. And then looking at your share of voice, again, that's Nielsen has a product for everything. Nielsen has a monitoring platform where you are able to measure and monitor how much where brands are spending. So they'll track things such as your TV flighting codes, your radio codes as well, just to see where it is people are advertising, and again associating the cost for that spot against their rate card. And that's where the share of spend will come in for your traditional media, so that they'll have that for your share of voice. Out of home has OMC, but now again, out of home, I may need to interview somebody to discuss out of home because that's a specialty in itself. But yes, in out of home, there is OMC. However, OMC only has a few stakeholders within the out of home space in South Africa are using their platform, and they do offer opportunities there for you to check your share of voice for that platform, as well as share spend and yeah, that those two key metrics. You're able to then assess those for on in OMC for outdoor. Unfortunately, it does not apply to every outdoor owner out there. You will know that, in fact, there is a large group of Black media owners in the outdoor space that aren't represented on this platform. So there is that discrepancy, but again, there is a platform that does do that in the market for out of home. And then again, going back into digital, you're able to assess your share of voice looking at your mentions, and this is through social listening tools. One of my favorites to use is Brandwatch for this purpose. And you write a little bit of code and you're able to see, okay, what are people talking about within your category context, and get an estimate of what your share of voice is. Nice thing about Brandwatch is that they've got a lot of historical data. Of course, this comes at a price, but you're able to access a lot of historical data on digital to assess over time what your share of voice for your brand has been, or um, and get a sense of also sentiment. So what are people saying about your brand on those platforms? So that's the nice thing about digital, is that you can go as far as understanding people's sentiment and assessing that from that perspective. So I hope that answers the question on systems that you can use to pull the data for share of spend, share of voice, and share of market. And then finally, to answer the second part, the impact of an ad. So if you want to know how different platforms and how that brand ad will perform, so essentially we're covering for a campaign for a lunch bar, for example, right? The brand will perform differently on TV, radio, digital, out of home, right? Because these platforms do perform quite differently from each other, and also serve different purposes, right? So different parts of your user journey will require one platform over the other. And this is again how you effectively manage your share of spend, is that you ensure that you're using the platform for the right purpose. Excuse that. Right. So To answer that, they will perform differently because of the nuanced ways these platforms all perform. But you're able then to measure and explore how that ad performs on different platforms, and then optimize your budget to ensure that you are using the right platform for that video ad. So video might work on one platform better than it does on another. TV great for video, of course, video for TV, but you'll find that maybe on your socials, well, video does work, in my opinion, better for socials, but there are times and places for stills and times and places for video dynamic content, and these will perform very differently from each other. It is difficult to compare your TV to your radio, but then you can compare. Your one radio spot to your next radio spot, if that makes sense. I hope I answered that question. And then with the last part of the question that isn't included in the screenshot, around whether this is a model or a measuring mechanism, well, share of voice, share of spend, and share of market can be considered both. You can actually look at them as both because they do function as a measurement. So you are measuring a share or a portion of something. So you can look at it as a measurement mechanism. However, you also can look at it as a part of your broader model to assess brand visibility. Spend effectiveness as well as market position. So you can look at them from both respects, whether it is for one or the other. So I hope this answers your questions, Amo. And I really hope to hear and see more questions come below. And please do like, share, and subscribe with your friends and family. Make sure that everyone gets access to this information so we are all learning and growing together. Bye. Are you listening? Damn.